Sue Smith sitting in for Aaron Rand. Great to be with you. And don't forget, I'm going to be speaking with Charles Milliard, coming up just after 4 o'clock. But for the next little while, we're going to look at some kind of a bunch of different topics. We're going to talk about the education system in a minute. But right now, we're going to talk about travel insurance. Because after the recent problems at WestJet, many passengers who were stranded found out that they were not covered by travel insurance. So what is in that fine print? If you get travel insurance, and not everybody does, do you actually know what it covers? For example, a travel advisory from Ottawa can often void insurance if you go to a place where they say you really shouldn't go. And so can a notice to strike. I did not know that. Barry Choi is a money and travel expert, and he joins us on the line. Hi, Barry.
Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So, I mean, what went through your mind when you saw those stranded travelers? You know, I saw so many that were like stuck in, seems like paradise, stuck in Mexico, but, you can't get to work, your hotel's over.
The first thing, honestly, is what we're going to talk about. First thing I thought was, I hope they have travel insurance. I'm not even lying. Unfortunately, we've seen this in the past with different airlines. We've seen it with WestJet specifically. So I hate to say it, but I never feel like I can rely on airlines for these kind of things, and that's why travel insurance personally gives me peace of mind. Yeah,
well, and also, I mean, not to slam any airline over the other, but we have heard lots of stories about people trying to claim, because we had a lot of experts on saying, no, don't cancel your flights, let WestJet cancel it, and then they'll have to, try to get a hold of WestJet, right? But okay, let's assume that you are going to get travel insurance. What kind of travel insurance should you get?
So it really depends on the situation. Someone who's young and healthy is just taking, like, say, a 1-week trip to the Caribbean, probably going to have different insurance needs than someone like my dad who's 80, has had multiple surgeries, has health issues all the time. So to me, it's really the fine print. Credit card insurance can be good for healthy people. But generally speaking, not generally, I'd say for most people, getting a standalone policy from a third-party company such as To-Go or Manulife or Safety Wing can just give you so much better coverage, and they can really explain what you are and aren't covered for.
Okay, so let me just back you up a step, because I have to say I travel a lot and always have, and I, years ago thought I was being really smart by paying the extra premium for credit card travel insurance, and you're telling me that maybe now it's time for me to buck it up a bit?
Well, based on what I was saying, I don't want you to age yourself, but certain situations where it might be case. But you know what? Even me, I'm in my mid-40s. Sometimes I think I know these policies in and out, and I get caught off guard. Yeah. There's less coverage than I thought it would be because it was per day instead of cumulative, right? Yeah. So these days, more for my parents who are a bit older, I told them, it's like, if you guys are going to travel, we're just going to buy you a travel insurance policy. Yeah. I know it's expensive, obviously, for especially anyone over 65 who's had health issues, but at the same time, it's like, it's just the cost of business. I'd rather pay that money than have them travel without insurance, right? Like, it makes no sense. And just for listeners, so we're clear, is there's two types of travel insurance. There's travel medical insurance, which is pretty straightforward. But there's also extended travel insurance, which would have protected those passengers who were affected by the strike, which covers things such as flight delays, hotels, flight cancellation, things like that.
Okay, so let's get back to this whole thing about the fine print. So, and not to get back to myself all the time, but I, as I say, I never have bought extra travel insurance, and I always thought that I was covered. But often I do sports when I travel. So the last trip I went on, I was surfing. The trip before that, I was scuba diving. And those are things that are in the fine print. Like, so what kind of things do you need to look for in the fine print?
So the big things is extreme sports is one thing. Usually more like bungee jumping, skydiving. Those are pretty big things. Scuba diving is sometimes in there. But if you're doing like stand-up paddleboarding, you're probably fine. But you really need to read the policy details. Some more relevant things that would have affected people more recently would be like acts of war. So the Middle East, that war kind of came out of nowhere. It was a little bit unexpected. So most credit cards don't cover acts of war by default. Like, you just can't get coverage for it. But third-party insurance policies do get it. And you kind of alluded to this in the intro. Once the government of Canada makes a statement to avoid all non-essential travel, your insurance doesn't apply if you're booking the trip. However, it only applies to the active war part. So say you're in the country, missiles go off, one lands on you, you wouldn't get covered for that. But say you're in that country already, it's your home country, you've been there for a while, the war came out, you trip and you fall and you break your leg. You would probably still be insured for that because it's unrelated to the war. So you can see where these things get very detailed. Another good example is a lot of Canadians, we like to go down to the Caribbean. Normally, you're covered for hurricanes or weather delays. Like the same thing would apply to forest fires. But once a hurricane starts forming and they're given a formal name, your insurance would no longer apply if you were to try to buy it. Like you've already had it before, you're okay. But if you're trying to buy a package immediately to cover yourself, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, but let me ask you a question. If you are already there, like let's say you go to the Caribbean in hurricane season, which now can be anywhere from, June until October and sometimes even November, and you have travel insurance and you're hit by a hurricane, like what then?
So if you're already there and then they came out of nowhere, right? Then your insurance still applies. So a good example would also be someone like who was considering buying a WestJet flight just recently, and they're like, oh, you know what? I'll just buy travel insurance. That way, if my flight is canceled, I'm covered. But no, because that WestJet strike was already announced, It doesn't apply anymore. So it is always the details, and admittedly, it can be very frustrating. That's why going through a travel insurance broker sometimes is the best to just really ask them the details, because with those third-party policies, you can buy specific riders. So if you've had health issues but your doctor has cleared you, you can get a separate policy that specifically says you're covered in this situation.
Right.
And then it's black and white. Like the insurance company has essentially cleared you to travel for those conditions.
So just to cross the T here, back to the acts of war. So if you're in a country and then that the country goes to war, or an act of war is perpetuated on the country, then you're still covered if you already had travel insurance? Or are you never covered?
If you already had travel insurance, again, like if you had a third-party insurance policy, you would be good. The thing about these I hate about these general travel insurance, travel advisories is that sometimes they're very wide and it makes no sense. So earlier in the year, many of you listeners know that there was some cartel violence in Puerto Vallarta of Mexico, which is the western side of the country. But if you're flying to Cancun, it's like 10 hours away. It's like nowhere close. But the government of Canada made such a broad advisory to avoid all non-essential travel to all of Mexico. People who are going to Cancun or considering a trip to Cancun all of a sudden couldn't get insurance coverage for that, even though the violence was nowhere near. So sometimes it's a bit silly, and this is, again, one of those situations where you really want to think about which travel provider you go with. You can contact them and say, hey, would I be covered in this location, even though there's an advisory in place?
It sounds like, too, and I don't know if I'm reading between the lines here, that you should book your travel insurance when you book your flight, because that way anything that happens afterwards, like a notice to strike or an act of war, then you're covered.
That's 100% it. You should be trying to do it as quickly as possible. Some insurance policies also require you to do it within a reasonable amount of time. And also even if you're buying an all-inclusive vacation package, whether it be through WestJet or Air Canada Vacations, they actually also offer it's not really insurance, but for like additional $99 or $200, they will allow you to change your flight or your vacation to a different time up to a certain date. Right. So whether that be 2 days or 7 days out. So it's kind of like an insurance policy, but it's not protecting you for medical reasons. It's kind of protecting your own vacation package. In those cases, and similar to what you're saying, if you know hurricane season is much longer, does it make sense to spend an extra $100 per person to just give you that extra peace of mind? Mm-hmm. Probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I always thought my credit card would cover that. So are you saying it's not even worth paying the extra money for your credit card insurance, travel insurance?
Well, again, it depends. I hate saying that so many times because some credit card insurance policies are better than others, right? Often it can be very helpful. One time I was flying back home from Calgary to Toronto, and just by bad luck, that exact moment my plane was trying to land, huge thunderstorm rolled into Toronto over the airport. For a good hour, no plane to land. I got stranded in Montreal. We didn't even attempt to land again. We went right to Montreal. I knew I was insured up to $200 a night for a hotel and meals and incidentals, so I was able to claim that without worrying having to go through the airline. So insurance is good for many different situations. Yeah. Even further back, I flew to Europe, and then same idea. The laws are a little bit different there, but there was a snowstorm in Edinburgh, and we couldn't fly. But I was allowed to book a different airline, which actually cost more than my flight to Europe itself, and I was able to get it fully refundable via my insurance. But that was like 20 years ago.
Wow.
I'm sure they're much stricter now, right?
Well, listen, I've learned a lot, but I'll have a lot more questions, but that's all the time we have now. You'll have to come back, Barry. Thank you.
No problem, anytime.
That's Barry Choi. He is a money and travel expert, warning you to read the fine print on your insurance and basically get insurance.
Hey, I'm Ruby Carr, the host of the podcast Encore. Check out our brand new episodes featuring music from the show that everyone is reheating as we speak, Heated Rivalry. Join me as I go behind the songs that brought Shane and Elia together. I'll tell you the stories of Feist, My Moon, My Man, Wolf Parade's I'll Believe in Anything, and Tattoos, All the Things She Said, and how they all became a part of this global phenomenon. Stream Encore on iHeartRadio, Crave, or wherever you get your podcasts.